3, 2, 1.
In 1858, as the country was getting closer to disunion, two politicians ran for a seat in the Senate. Stephen Douglas, who was very known, was competing against Lincoln. This occurred from August 21st to October 15, where 7 debates took place around the state of Illinois. Those believed that it was the right of the citizens of the territory to permit or prohibit slavery, but Lincoln believed that citizens had no such right.
I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so. There is no reason in the world why the Negro is not entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence. I hold that he is as much entitled to these as the white man. That is good doctrine, but Mr. Lincoln is afraid to advocate it in the latitude of Chicago, where he hopes to get his votes. It is good doctrine in the anti-abolition countries for him. Let me ask him why he cannot the same in the North as in the South, the same in every country, if he has a conviction that they are just. On October 16, 1859, John Brown led a small army of 21 men into Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His plans were to arm slaves in the area with weapons he would seize from the federal arsenal and move south along the Appalachian Mountains. His plans came to a quick end when the militia surrounded them, forcing them to take refuge in the arsenal's engine house. The next day, on the 17th, the U.S. Marines under General Robert E. Lee arrived, stormed the engine house, killed most of the raiders, and captured Brown. Later, Brown was placed on trial and charged with treason. He was sentenced to death and hanged on December 2, 1859, in Charleston. On November 6, 1860, Abraham Lincoln is elected president, becoming the first Republican to win the presidency. He received only 40% of the popular votes, but still defeated Southern Democrat John C. Breckinridge, Constitutional Union candidate John Bell, and Northern Democrat Stephen Douglas.
A few weeks after the election, South Carolina seceded from the Union and called for a convention. From January 9th to February 1st, 7 more states seceded from the Union, which were Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Right after Lincoln's inauguration, April 12, 1861, under General Pierre Beauregard, opened fire in Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. This was the beginning of the Civil War. In April 15, 1861, President Lincoln proclaimed a blockade of southern ports and called up for 75 militiamen. Lincoln's proclamation made 4 more states secede from the Union.
The First Battle of Bull Run, also known as the First Manassas, was on July 21, 1861, near Manassas Junction, Virginia. Union troops led by General McDowell marched from federal capital in Washington, D.C. to strike a Confederate force along a small river known as Bull Run. During the fight, the Confederates were able to break the Union's right flank, forcing the Federals to retreat. This was the first major land battle, and the Confederate victory gave the South confidence, while it shocked Northerners, who realized the war would not be won as easily as they hoped.
The Confederacy began to build a fleet of ships with iron panels. These ships were designed to slam and sink the enemy's wooden vessels. From March 8th through 9th, 1862, the Confederate ironclad sinks 2 Union ships, and then they battle the Union ironclad, and it's a draw. On April 6, 1862, 40,000 Confederate soldiers under the command of General Albert Sidney Johnston surprised General Ulysses Grant at Shiloh on the Tennessee River with 13,000 Union killed and wounded. On April 24, 1862, 17 Union ships under the command of the officer David Farragut takes New Orleans, which is the South's greatest seaport.
The Battle of Seven Pines, aka Battle of Fair Oaks, took place on May 31st and June 1st, 1862 in Henrico County, Virginia. On May 31st, General Joseph E. Johnston, a Confederate, attempted to overwhelm 2 Federal corps that looked isolated south of the Chickahominy River. The Confederates succeeded in pushing back the 4th Corps and causing casualties. General Johnston was wounded during action, and Major General G.W. Smith temporarily took over. On June 1st, the Confederates renewed their assaults against the Federals. The fighting ended about 11:30 a.m. when the Confederates withdrew, but ultimately both sides claimed victory. In the Second Battle of Bull Run, John Pope and his Union army waited for George McClellan's Army of the Potomac. Confederate General Robert E. Lee decided to strike first by sending half of his men to hit the Federal supply base at Manassas. Led by Thomas Stonewall Jackson, they seized supplies, burned the depot, and then established hidden positions in the woods. On August 29, Pope's federal clashed with Jackson's men with losses on both sides. In the end, Pope's army retreated. September 17 was the bloodiest battle. Few days before the Battle of Antietam, Confederate General Robert E. Lee divided his men, sending half of them to Stonewall Jackson to capture the Union garrison at Harper's Ferry. Jackson was successful. President Lincoln placed General George B. McClellan in charge of the Union troops. On the 17th, a savage and bloody combat continued for 8 hours across the Antietam Creek. The Confederates were pushed back but not defeated. Later on, Lee's forces retreated, giving President Lincoln the chance to issue an Emancipation Proclamation, turning the Union effort in the Civil War into a fight for abolition of slavery.
Fredericksburg was fought from December 11 to December 15, 1862, between General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army at Northern Virginia and the Union Army by General Ambrose Burnside. On January 1, 1863, President Lincoln issues a final proclamation freeing all slaves in the territory of the Confederates. From May 1st to May 4th, 1863, the Union Army under General Hooker is defeated by Lee's much smaller force at the Battle of Chancellorsville in Virginia. General Johnson is wounded very bad by his own soldiers and later dies, which the South suffers a lot.
The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to 3rd, 1863. The Union Army led by General George Gordon Meade and the Confederate led by Robert E. Lee. On July 3rd, Lee ordered an attack by fewer than 5,000 troops on General Meade's center at Cemetery Ridge. The assault, known as Pickett's Fence, managed to disrupt the Union lines but eventually failed at the cost of many Confederate deaths. Lee was forced to withdraw his battered army. On September 19 and 20, Braxton Bragg's Army of Tennessee defeated a Union force led by General William Rosecrans in the Battle of Chickamauga. From November 23rd to 25th, the Battle of Chattanooga happened, with results of the Union forcing the Confederates back into Georgia. The Battle of Cold Harbor was fought on June 3rd, 1864 at Cold Harbor, Virginia. The battle began when the Union Army of the Potomac, led by General Ulysses S. Grant, attacked General Robert E. Lee Confederate's army. At dawn on the 3rd, Grant began to unleash firepower at the Confederate line. More than 5,000 Union soldiers were killed or wounded during the first hour of the attack. Grant commented in his memoirs that this was the only attack he wished he had never ordered.
The war was now in its 4th year, and Lincoln as president faced many obstacles. In November 8, 1864, elections came up again. The Democrats nominated George B. McClellan, and Lincoln ran for a second term and won 55% of the vote. November 15, 1864, after destroying a Landis warehouse and railroad facilities, Sherman begins a march to the sea with 62 men. On December 21, 1864, Sherman reaches Georgia and telegraphs Lincoln offering him Savannah as a Christmas present. On January 31, 1865, U.S. Congress approves the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to abolish slavery. April 2, 1865, Grant's forces break through Lee's lines at Petersburg. Confederate General Ambrose is killed.
April 4th, 1865, 2 days after Confederate forces evacuated Richmond, President Abraham Lincoln and his son Tad visited the smoldering ruins of the South's former capital. As he walked the streets of Richmond, newly freed slaves kneeled and thanked him. Lincoln went to speak with the delegations of the South to possibly come up with an idea on how to bring the war to a speedy, peaceful end. 5 days later, Lee sent a message to Grant announcing his willingness to surrender. The two generals met with the parlor at the Wilmer McLennan home and made an agreement saying that all officers and men were to be pardoned. They would be sent home with their private property, and officers would keep their sidearms. On April 14th, 1865, President Abe Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer.